Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this week's video, I'm going to be going through my first year Masters of Architecture project, and in particular the outline brief. So without further ado, let's get into it. So my project for first year Masters design was titled Amphibious Rome, a hydrological centre providing an alternative democracy for the city of Rome. The outline brief of the project is broken down into the project introduction, which includes the narrative, overflooding risk in Rome and the impact on the city. The client, site analysis, which includes my proposed strategy, the site within my strategy area, connections, access and contextual link, relationship with the river Tiber and relationship with government buildings in Rome, and finally my concept proposal development, which includes the initial proposal from my architectural strategy, factors of consideration, precedent exploration, and conceptual proposals for an architectural synthesis. And I just wanted to include like a quick narrative of the project that you can read. I won't go into it because it'll take too much time to just go through that. And then the next page, I'm hoping that I can just go through, like, the project is named Amphibious Rome due to the connections I wanted to make with both life on land and on water. And a big factor that kind of influenced my decision, I'd say, was the data on which the risks of flooding pose to the city, as I go on to state that Rome is targeted as one of the major global cities that will be severely impacted by flooding, with the level of water rising even higher, and how my scheme aims to provide a response to this through projecting the scenario to take place in the year 2084. So it's kind of just a bit of a weird year to put out there, but it's like in the future, but like not too far away, So potential responses which will impact the city could include working with the river to progress and push the narrative of how the city of Rome can provide architectural responses to address and tackle climate threats, specifically overflooding, having a strategy that works on the edge of the river and to investigate factors such as floating structures and create systems that intertwine the land on either the side of the river, and of course to ensure the scheme meets the environmental needs of the site, and that it is equally valuable that the proposal contextually relates to the city to ensure there's a synthetic relationship between design and humanity. The project clients for the project include the City Council of Rome, the EU, and the inclusion of COP26. That is more evident than ever before that this new modern renaissance of architecture in Rome will respond to mitigating threats to humanity. The strategy for my proposed scheme would have water wheels to transport water loads from different parts of the river, depending on the level, especially during heavy rain and expected flood periods. Urban beaches, activity platforms, floating pools, which would also act as water trapping mechanisms to reduce the strain on the river, in addition to biodiversity zones, a river water pumping system, and an air refreshing system along the edges of the river Tiber. Highlighting the proposed site within the larger strategy area for which my design project in part 2 of the module could be developed, and explaining that due to the nature of my project aiming to bridge the gap between civilians and officials when acting towards important world topics such as climate change and overflooding within the city of Rome, it's extremely important to acknowledge and use the narrative of the built environment when dictating my proposal in the next project. Connections, access and contextual link. Pretty self-explanatory, as I'm able to identify the site I aim to work with and within, and the landmarks within close proximity to my site, which allow the future proposal to be located close to the significant surrounding context. The river is the most important element in my project, and through studying drawings from Piranesi and Nolli maps, in addition to my relatively clean and clear illustration of the river, it allows me to suggest that the river is the binding thread that holds the city together, and that it's an integral feature of Rome. And I also stated that without the creation of a system to protect the river and all that lies around it, Rome could become forgotten, and it could become like a forgotten city. My project leads a manifesto that is very politically driven, with all the work I aim to drive towards working on factors such as global warming, climate change, and threats posed to the environment. Therefore, having a page dedicated to the relationships my site context has with government buildings was an added bonus. Identifying these two buildings and how they were designed in a style which combines the older memories of Roman architecture with an attempt to be modern. As I move into the more analytical aspect of the project, I wanted to make a list of initial functions through which I can then categorize into 5 subjects, being political, scientific, leisure, transportation, and other services, including a conceptual section of where these functions could be arranged, although there's no correlation at all, with the proposed design and the arrangement of these functions in this early stage mock-up diagram. However, externalizing the data and text into drawings, I find, always provides added context for not just the examiner and your tutor, but also for yourself. This then led me to break down some factors to consider in both social and environmental forms. So for the social, I've included bring the values of the people of Rome to the scheme, continuity of culture, dynamic between people, and the internal and external environment. Explore current and alternative future modes of transport and access to and from the development, and to ensure that there's a natural flow as users transition in and out between the proposal and the surrounding environment. And for the environmental section, I stated that the building should become a generator and not a consumer, and that was predominantly for things such as energy, as it can be very costly too. What else did I put down? I also included that the ability to adapt depending on climate factors such as the rise in sea level to ensure installation of the proposal brings benefits to the surrounding site through the ways in which existing buildings could adapt and modify to the changing environment. The orientation of the scheme must also work with and not against natural elements. And finally, to not destroy or remove any elements from the existing site. Exploring a range of precedents such as the Han River Eco City in China, and on the bottom right of the screen you see my response and how I wanted to emulate this style and apply and adapt elements based on the functions of the building that I will develop later in the next stage of the project. The Nanchang Waves project, also in China, and my interpretation of the development, which drew me to the grand spiraling structure that oversees the rest of the development and brings a sense of authority and power, which was crucial for me as it would inspire the development of the project in the second phase. The little island in New York, which I was very fortunate to visit this year, and it's based in New York City, and Heatherwick Studio provide an alternative approach to managing and responding to the impacts of high sea level. And in my scenario, this could be interpreted as a very appropriate strategy to deal with overflooding and the impacts that it would have on my proposal, using the varied heights of the concrete stumps as mechanisms to control the structure of the building as the levels of water change. The Reichstag in Berlin, which I also visited but several years back, but unfortunately only from the outside. And from the developments from Foster and Partners, the dome symbolizes the reunification of Germany and provides a space for all members of the public to experience. I think that this bridging of the gap between government officials and civilians is a crucial element, and one that I wanted to also include due to the access and accessibility I wanted my project to have. And by taking inspiration from schemes with project types that relate in some sort to what I want to emulate and design for my own project, it allows me to understand a new dynamic to design and architecture. And that's why I want to examine the Dachang Muslim Cultural Center and how using the sensitivity of the water and the existing site around the area will dictate the approach I take to construct a narrative that works with both Rome on a traditional and modern level. And based on the influence from the Muslim Cultural Center, I was then led to study the Mondadori headquarters by Oscar Niemeyer and how his delicate and sympathetic approach to design enables a transparent connection between land and water, and how the structures we design work best when linked to the surrounding environment. And I ended this segment of the design project of the outline brief with some conceptual proposals, working with the form, relationship to context, human experiences, creating a place of great significance, and of course, taking extreme care when working with the given urban fabric of the surrounding environment. I've thoroughly enjoyed going through the first part of my architecture project from first year, and I hope that by going through it I can bring some inspiration and bring some tips and tricks that can kind of help you in your projects, whether you're an aspiring architecture student or currently in your studies. So stay tuned for part 2, which comes out next week, and thank you so much for watching.